Hi, everybody, and welcome to the University of Scouting 2021. Thank you so much for joining us. This is going to be our year. I'm hoping on it. 2020 was not a good one, but we're going to make this one better. So let's go ahead and get started. My name is Ellen McAllister, and I am the committee chair for the Special Needs Committee. I'm also the Cub Master Emeritus for PAC 147, which is a local Cub Scout pack that has special needs. So, the first thing we're going to talk about is our objectives. Why are you here, and what is it you're hoping to learn? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about doing a proper intake. Now, of course, I'm going to blend this specifically to people with autism, but really this is an intake you could do with any and all future scouts because it will help you to make sure that you're better prepared with the young people coming into your unit. We're going to review some of the triggers, some of the behaviors, and some of the repairs that you want to consider when bringing the scout into your unit. Please remember, ladies and gentlemen, every child deserves to be a scout, but not every scout belongs in every unit. There are differences between the units, and we want to make sure that this child is placed in the correct unit, okay? We want to also introduce a form that's going to help you to do this intake and to ensure that you, in fact, are the right fit for this person, and if not, to help you to advance them up the chain of command so that we do find that exact correct unit. Okay, so let's set the scene. You're the Cub Master or the Scout Master, and the phone rings. The caller identifies themselves as the parent or a guardian of someone who has autism, and they have been referred to you. So they're looking for a group for their child or their young adult to join where they're going to be accepted, have fun, and be like everybody else. What are you going to say? Well, the first thing you need to understand is what is autism. Now, we've been doing classes on autism for many years now, and actually things over the last several years have become very, very good. People are really beginning to not only understand and recognize autism, but we have more and more champions for autism every day. I am so glad to see that you are also considering being part of that group. So autism, if you look at the slide that you will see on the other half of this page, there is a page that says autism. It is always unique, totally interesting, and sometimes mysterious. So the thing about autism, it is a complex developmental disability. Typically, it is diagnosed between the ages of 3 and 5. Now, if your young person is a boy, they generally, as a rule, are diagnosed a little bit earlier than girls are, but they both get diagnosed. The reason for that is in the natural, normal development of the brain of the male versus the female. The female is usually a little bit more interactive, a little more social, and has the ability to mimic behaviors of those around her than, say, the male, whose brain is a little bit more mechanical, a little bit more, let's put things together one and one and one. They don't tend to, at that stage, be able to develop that, oh, let me see what she's doing and mimic what they're doing. That's the main reason why the boys will be diagnosed before the girls. The girls generally will get diagnosed a little bit later on. There is no one single cause for autism. Okay, there is genetics. Yes, there are some people where it runs in the family. Then there is environmental. There's a lot of pollutants in the environment, and they are finding that there actually is a genome where there is a difference in the person with autism and without autism. So we're going to move on from there. If you have any more questions about what specifically autism is, at the end of this presentation, I'll give you my contact number. Please feel free to give me a call. So let's think about this. What exactly does someone with autism look like? Guess what? You and me. They don't look any different than us, really. Okay? Their behaviors are what give them up. So, they could be high functioning. Albert Einstein, Bill Gates, and several other people in Hollywood. They're high functioning. And unless you hit their trigger points, you won't know there's anything different about them. Or they might be low functioning. This is someone who maybe has speech problems, has hearing problems, has communication. They can take the information in, but they can't put it out, or they can put it out, but they can't take it in. They may be able to coordinate some things and not coordinate other things. So autism is, in fact, a spectrum. But the bottom line to all of this, they are functioning individuals. Our job is to help them by using the tools that have already been established with them. So now let's talk about the behaviors. Some of the behaviors that you see, because I did say that one of the things that makes them different from us is, in fact, their behaviors. So there's a saying, when you've met one person with autism, yeah, you've met one person with autism. Each of us are different. We all have our strengths. We all have our gifts. And we all have our challenges or opportunities, okay? Some of us are quiet, introverted, shy, easygoing, or we like to be, as my husband used to call that, the wallflower, okay? Then you're going to have your average kid, and that's pretty much the bulk of the population. And this is someone who will join right in there, and yeah, they're going to have their good days and their bad days. Sometimes they'll be loud, sometimes they won't. Sometimes they'll be coordinated, and sometimes they're going to be a klutz, okay? Then there is the third level, and this is the person who's loud, extroverted, really in there, wants to run with everything. But with our autistic companions, some of that may not be, we're going to call it appropriate, because they approach it differently than the rest of the community does, okay? They might be abrasive and opinionated or stubborn in their ways. But you need to understand something. They're not doing that to be difficult. They're doing that to level the playing ground. So does this sound like any of the other scouts you're already dealing with? Probably not. So now you're just going to be including one more, but you're going to be better prepared to include that one more. Let's talk about some triggers. Okay, we all have triggers, folks. I have triggers, you have triggers. A trigger is something that irritates you enough that just sets you off, okay? You have that one person, and they do this. Now, what you can't see is I'm tapping my fingers on a table. And we've all had that coworker or that relative or friend that has that nervous habit, and you just want to reach over and grab their hands. But because of our development, we know that in certain situations, it's inappropriate to reach over and grab their hand. We can't do that, okay? So that might be a trigger for them, but the response to the trigger is where the difference is, okay? Another trigger, have you all listened to the news? And there's that one news reporter, that has either a high-pitched voice, shrill, an accent, or just something about their way they're talking that you just want to reach into the camera and you just want to get them because you don't want them to talk anymore, okay? Again, you and I know all we got to do is change the channel. For someone on the spectrum, it's maybe not quite that simple. And so these are some of the triggers that will set them off because their coping skills are not the same as ours. Okay, I think you get the point of what a trigger is. It could be anything. It could be light, sound, taste, texture, a variety of things. Okay, so one of the things that I like to do when I am teaching about autism is I like to make everybody in my audience autistic for a minute. Now let's make that 10 minutes. And I'll do things like put one person in the middle and have 4 people around them. Now, of course, everybody consents to it. Nobody is forced to do anything. And you might try this as an event for your unit. The person in the middle is going to be our autistic one. The people on the outside are going to be the triggers. So one person might go, put the lights on, off, on, off, on, off. Now, the most of us would get annoyed with that, but if we know we're being tested, we're like, whatever. Okay? The next trigger is light. Okay, so we were talking about the light. So again, the triggers up and down can bother some of us, but also sound. You and I, when we flip a switch, we might not even hear the click, 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 click. They might. Have you ever had a nail in your tire and it going clip-hump, clip-hump, clip-hump? And after a while, you're like, I have got to get to the gas station and get this tended to. Okay? So there, we have a switch that's giving us light and giving us sound. Those of us that are neurotypical may not perceive it. They will. The other thing I'll have somebody do is maybe stand next to them and just poke, 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 poke. Now go ahead and do that to yourselves. And really, that's not much of an issue. You're like, okay, so I'm poking myself. But now remember, that's on top of the light. Then I might have someone in front of them blowing in their face. Now, some of us really don't like that. Can you imagine having the lights up and down, the poking going on, and someone blowing in your face and staring in your face? Are you starting to get uncomfortable? Oh, but I'm not done yet. There's someone behind you. And the person behind you is tugging on your hair. Now, again, it doesn't have to be hurtful. But now you put all of this together. Beginning to feel a little autistic, are you? So perhaps that person is able to say, stop, I've had enough. Our brethren with autism can't do that. Their stimulus is always going on. So the next thing I want to talk about is bombardment with stimulation. So I just gave you a very, very minor example of what, when you're having someone become autistic, you can do to them. And trust me, do it in your units because it's a great tool. It really opens people's eyes when they start making fun of the new kid. Okay, well, you come over here and let's make you autistic for a minute, see how much you like it, and then explain that that person cannot shut it off like you can. They can't raise their hand and say, okay, I'm done with all this extra stimulation. I just need to have the normal stuff. Okay? So, we're all bombarded daily, as I said. Okay? The difference is those of us without autism, our brains have the capability of filtering out the stimuli that we do not need to pay attention to. They do not have that capability. So you're sitting in your rooms now and you're watching the video and you're listening to me. So you are hearing something, my voice. Can you hear the noise in the background at your house? Can you hear your air conditioning? Can you hear the cars outside? Now some of you are going to say, yeah, actually I can. But see, you weren't paying attention to that before. Okay. You're using your eyes and you're looking at me. Are you aware of all the stimulation in the picture around me, or are you truly just focused on my face? See, one of the things that I ran into with a lot of people, even with my own sons, is they frequently are accused of not paying attention because they won't look at you in the face. They'll do something like this. So you're talking to me and I'm going to be answering you and I'm going to be doing this. So it looks like I'm completely ignoring you. And then I had someone, my own son, in fact, say to me, well, your face is distracting me. I can either pay attention to looking at you or listening to you. How interesting is that? So the next time you're around someone with autism and they're doing this, please do not say anything you do not want repeated. It will be, because they are listening, I guarantee. Okay. So that's the vision, that's the hearing. Now let's talk about sensation. All of you, most likely, are sitting down. Prior to me saying this, are any of you aware of the cushion under your bum? Is it soft? Is it hard? Is it warm? Is it cold? Were you even thinking about that before I brought it up? Again, that's another sensory issue that we deal with every day. And we just decide whether or not we're going to pay attention. Now, mind you, you're shifting your attention as I'm bringing up new things. On the autism spectrum, they cannot. This is all filtering in their brains constantly, and it doesn't stop. Okay, let's talk about your feet. I know I'm in my nice comfy slippers because I'm videotaping from home. So my feet are cushioned and they're warm. But maybe you're sitting in the kitchen and you didn't put your shoes on and your feet are on the cold tile floor. It's hard. It's cold. It's firm. It's soft. It's warm. It's wet. It's dry. Again, You didn't think about these, but now you are. They can't stop. So now you start to feel a little overwhelmed with just the few senses I have brought to you. You can think about the feeling in your mouth right now. Is it dry? Is it moist? Do you have a toothache? Did you bite your tongue? Okay. Then you're going to put food in your mouth. Is it spicy? Is it cold? Does it have ridges? Does it have little bone chips? Is it kind of mushy like mashed potatoes? Here again. So as you see, there's a lot of stimulation that they deal with that we don't think about because we don't have to, but they do. Okay? So let's talk about some triggers specific. Okay? And again, please remember, each trigger for each of us, whether we have autism or we don't, it's individual. Okay? My triggers are not going to be yours. Yours are not going to be mine. We may have some similar, but not all of them. Okay? So some examples, as I said earlier, light, sound, smell, texture. How about in a room? The volume of noise in the room, the volume of people in a room, the volume of objects in a room. See, we don't pay attention to this, but they do. For those of you that maybe suffer from claustrophobia, I think you might have a better understanding of this very item. When you walk into a room, there's 5 people, you're like, okay, I can handle it. It goes up to 50, you're like, I'm out of here, not staying. Okay? That's a very good example of it. And we all share that in common. Okay? All of this is called stress. And everybody's stressors, as I said, are different. So let's talk about this new person coming in. You're actually stressed right now because you're like, oh my God, I got this phone call from this parent who says that their child has been recommended to me by Kennedy Krieger Institute. What am I going to do? She says that nobody else wants her child. I don't want a child to feel bad, so I'm going to tell the parent, come on, bring the child in and let's go ahead and have a conversation. Okay? And in the back of your mind, you're like, oh my God, what am I doing? Most of you have someone in your unit, whether you know it or not, with special needs. The trick is, how do I look at this new person and determine, can I safely and effectively integrate them into my unit? Will we help this person? If not, I'm still going to bring them in. I'm still going to the intake. And then I'm going to go to my DE and say, hey, I've got a parent. Her name is Ellen. Her son's name is Stephen. He has autism. He's high functioning. However, while he would make a great scout, I don't think he could keep up with our unit, and we really want him to succeed. Can you help? Your DE knows the units in your area and most likely knows the characteristics, because we all know each of our units is a little different. And they will be able to make that placement. But by you doing the intake, you can hand the form off to the DE, who's going to hand it to the new scout leader. And this is good, solid scouting. This is what we're about, taking care of each other. Okay, so some of the things that you're going to want to do, you get the call, you're going to set up a meeting. Okay, so what you're going to want to do is you're going to introduce yourself in person. You want to tell them your title, your qualifications. Now, your qualifications, if you're a special ed teacher, absolutely. If you are the unit leader, or you are just a den leader, or you are the committee chair, whatever title it is, you need to let them know. Okay? You also need to let them know something about you that qualifies you to have this conversation. So again, the other thing that we want to do is continue to let them know about all the training that you're getting and your leadership has. So let's go to the second thing, which is something you're going to actually do first, and that is prepare where you're going to have this meeting. Remember, the parents or guardians have already told you that the child has special needs. And where possible, you really want to include that scout. One of the things about people in special needs is they often feel like they're talked about and not to. And guys, even a tiger cub has something to say about what he or she does or does not want to do. So try to include them where possible. Okay, you're going to set the ambiance. You're going to set the venue. You've got to have a room that's going to be conducive to this so that it's not a rock band playing in the next room, because that's going to be very, very distracting to them. The other thing that you're going to want to do is make sure the actual room itself is comfortable. Is it too cold? Is it too hot? Sometimes we can vary these things. Is there a lot of clutter around? Can we clean up the area a little bit so that we can all sit comfortably at a table and be close enough but yet be far enough? Because remember, one of the issues for them may be that they don't want to be close to people. And during these COVID times, that's actually not a bad thing. Okay, so it's not crowded. And you're going to be sending out an agenda to the parents so they have an understanding. Everybody needs to know, coming to this meeting, what we're going to be talking about, what we need to bring, and how long is it going to take. Because remember, if there's one thing about people with autism or people that work with them, is when they say they're going to be at 9:01, please trust and believe they will be there at 9:01. Very, very rarely will you run into a family, and there are some, where they can't seem to get there on time. Usually that's the family where they've got a lot of younger siblings and the mom or dad is trying to juggle multiple things. But typically on the spectrum, if they're told, wait a minute, they're timing you for a minute. You're not going to get to. Okay? So we're going to have this time, this duration, what's going to be expected of them, and what to do. Now, the other thing about the Scout is, as I said, you want to include them where possible. But I said earlier that depending upon where they are on the autism spectrum, they may be very verbal, they may be somewhat verbal, they may be limited in verbal, or they may use alternate communication styles. This is where having that information up front is really going to help, because even a nonverbal person is still communicating. I can shake my head like this, and you all know what I mean. I can shake my head like this, and you've got a good handle on what I'm trying to say. They can do the same thing. They can point at what they like, and they can do this at what they don't like. So there are a variety of other communication skills that they may come prepared with, and it's nice to know so that you look at them to incorporate them in this meeting. Okay. The intake form, which is you're going to see at the end of the slides here, you want to have that ready. It's a tool. It is not something that is set up by national. It's not set up by a school. It's something that over the years, because I've dealt with this for so long, that I've just put together. And these are things that I know when families used to come to me, included information I needed. But I also gave a copy of it to a blank copy to the parent or the guardian, because they can start filling in some things to help make our meeting more efficient and give them the time, the clarity to sit there and go, okay, wait a minute. When Stephen's getting ready to have a meltdown, he does this, he does this, he does, see, I have to think about this thing because it doesn't automatically roll off my tongue. So by giving them the paper in advance, you give them the opportunity to think about what's going on, think about the responses, and how they can best join you in making this a successful transition. Okay. And the other thing you want to do is explain to the family that the reason for this form is you want to be able to share it with the other leaders. Why? Because Stephen may not be with me when he starts having a meltdown. He may be over there with Mr. Scott, or he may be over there with Mr. Kyle. And they need to know that when Stephen starts doing this, he's getting stressed. See, that would be on the form that I would share with them. So try and get their parents' permission, or the guardians, to include the leadership in that, okay? So this way we make sure that everyone on the leadership committee is going to follow the same plan. Because the one thing about these children is there's one set of rules at school, one set of rules at home, one set of rules in church, one set of rules in the doctor's office. You know where I'm going here. So we want to not make a new set of rules for this child, because that will decrease their enjoyment if they're starting to worry about, oh, I'm going to go to scouting. Miss Ellen's not going to let me play with my widget like everybody else lets me play. Okay, so you don't want to be doing that. Okay. Another thing that you're going to ask them to bring with them to the meeting is if their child has an IEP, an individual education plan, or a 504 plan. These are put together by professionals in the school districts. They are fantastic, they're expensive to put together, and they're done for you. We're going to take the information off of that IEP or 504, and we're going to turn it into an ISP, an individual scouting plan. Now, again, this is not something that is a formal document, but it is something that we're going to create during this meeting with this family and this child so that everyone's on the same page and we can all enjoy this experience. Okay? And then again, it would be nice if we could share the IEP or the 504, but they're very cumbersome to go through, so I would recommend only sharing the ISP. Okay? By the way, the difference between an IEP and a 504, an IEP, individual education plan, is a little bit more comprehensive. The 504 you generally going to find in the lower grades or for those who don't need the kind of accommodations that are needed by someone on a 504. By the way, in scouting, we never change requirements for merit badges, but we can make accommodations. And we'll get into that in a couple of other classes that you'll be going to today. Okay? So you need to understand again, this ISP is your recipe for success. And who doesn't want success? You know, we have that 1 hour a week that we go to scouting, and we want to enjoy it, and our parents want to enjoy it just as much as the children do. Okay, so a couple of things that we want to have in this ISP. For one thing, what does the scout want to be called? And that's really important because, you know, parents give their children names. So I named my child Stephen, and I just am picking on him because he's helping me with this video and he'll get me later for it. But I named him Stephen. I didn't call him Steve Boy. I didn't call him Hey Bud. I didn't call him a lot of other things. So when he goes to scouting, his expectation is he's going to be called Stephen. But see, when someone else is yelling, hey, bud, Stephen is going to completely ignore him. He hears him. It's not a hearing deficit, but that's not his name. He's not going to respond. Okay? Now, we want to know what are some of the behaviors. And there's 3 layers of this that you want to find out. You want to have the pre-meltdown, the meltdown, and the recovery. So first, let's define a meltdown. A meltdown, please understand, is not a temper tantrum. A temper tantrum is, I am not getting my way, ergo, I'm going to kick and scream and fuss, and I'm going to exhibit a behavior to make you uncomfortable until I tire you out, and you're going to give me what I want. Sometimes resulting in a spanking that I don't want. Okay? A meltdown is a situation whereby the individual is so stressed that they're decompensating. Their coping skills that they have to use every day, all day long, have now hit a maximum level, and whatever the stimuli is, it's creating a situation they can no longer handle. And so they engage in a behavior that we have termed meltdown. I said there's 3 stages of behaviors that you want to look at. The first one is the pre-meltdown, okay? Now, the pre-meltdown behavior is usually something, and we all have our telltale signs. It might be something like sticking a tongue out. It might be doing this on their head, okay? For Stephen, it was always this, okay? It's something that lets you know my coping skills are starting to get maxed out, and I may or may not be able to pull out of this by myself. Now, the parents and the guardians know what these behaviors are, and they're going to give you on the intake form some things to do. So I always knew with Stephen, when he started doing this, I would say, hey, Stephen, let's go do this. In other words, I would change the activity just ever so slightly. We would be on a camping trip, and the other kids would be very loud. Stephen could handle that. And I'd say, hey, Stephen, let's go reread that page in the scout book and see if we're doing this right. It was enough to give him a break so that he could cope again. So now we have talked about the pre-meltdown behaviors. These are things that we're going to see them do. The parents are going to tell us, and they're going to tell us what we can do to help them just divert, close down, and then this way they'll be able to come back to the activity without too much of a disruption or creating chaos in your unit. And that's often when I get called on a unit, that's usually the problem, is this child is creating chaos and they're wanting the child gone. So we can avoid that by just knowing these behaviors, their triggers, and then the recovery phase. Now let's talk about a meltdown. As I said, that is a significant decompensation in their coping skills. So we have missed Stephen doing this, okay? And now he's starting to run, okay? And that's his meltdown behavior. Is he's an escape artist. Well, if you're a scouting leader and you're responsible for that child's welfare and they take off and you've got other scouts here, you can't have that. So what can you do with that particular individual, and how do you prevent getting there? Again, you try and catch those pre-stages. You can't always. Now you're in the full-blown meltdown, and in this instance, the example I'm giving you is a scout's taken off. Well, first off, in scouting, we always talk about when we're going to events or doing things that we always want to have 2 deep leadership. When I'm talking about people with special needs, I always prefer 3 deep, because you have to plan. Remember, we're always prepared. You have to plan for the eventuality that somebody's going to do something and that leader's got to go somewhere, and now you're back down to the safe 2 deep leadership. Okay? So in this situation, the child's running. Well, Mr. Scott and Mr. Kyle, they're all there, and so is Mr. Hardy. Okay? And while we don't necessarily need a one-on-one with Stephen, in other words, so an adult who's always watching him, staying with him, it gives them the opportunity that no matter which of the leaders is by Stephen, when he gets ready to take off, the leader can say to the other guys, okay, we're running, and he can go get Stephen. Okay? The parent also might tell you other things to do, like when Stephen runs, he doesn't run out to the street, he runs to a corner so he can block his stimulation. And I know a lot of scouts that do something like that. I had one young man that his big thing when he had a meltdown is he would literally put himself in a corner. All I ever had to do for this young man is stand in front of him and put my hands like this. And look what I'm doing. I am cutting off some of the stimulation. He can't see behind because he's just going to be looking at me. So I give him the chance to come back down again from the overstimulation. And then once he comes down, I can say to him, okay, Mr. Jacob, Mr. Paul, Miss Susie, Miss Joanne, why don't we go get a drink of water? Okay, so we're going to walk over to the water fountain, going to get a drink of water. Okay, and guess what? Now they're focused on drinking that water. So I've given them the opportunity to bring that stress level back down again. Now, depending upon how bad the meltdown, you may need to give them 5 minutes, 10 minutes of timeout. Don't make it a punishment. And also don't make it a big issue with the rest of the people of the unit, because we don't want to embarrass this person. Remember, they're overstimulated. It's not their fault. They're doing the best they can, and we want to help them. So what we're going to do is, if they need a little extra time, what I used to do with my pack is I would have a table on the side with crayons, coloring books, and other things. And I would say, why don't we go color a picture together? Now, at the Cub Scout level, that'll work. At the troop level, it might be something as simple as, hey, Stephen, you know what? It looks like we're getting a little low on firewood. How about you and I go take a walk? We will take Paul with us, and let's go gather some more firewood. What I'm doing is I'm removing him from the venue, so whatever it is that's there that's stressing him, I'm decreasing it. And again, 2 deep leadership. I said Stephen, and I'm taking someone else with us. Now, okay? So we're just going to go in the woods. We may only pick up twigs. That's not the focus. The focus is to give him something to do, to change the venue, and give him the time to regroup, and then let him tell you, okay, we can go back to the campsite, or we can go back to the den unit, or whatever it is that they were in. Okay? So that's going to help there. Now, then we have the post. So we've helped them past the actual meltdown, And we've helped them through the repair phase. The repair phase is what they determine is the repair, not us. A repair phase is where Stephen would say to me, okay, Miss Ellen, I'm okay, but you know what? I'm a little hungry right now. Can I just go get a half a sandwich? And then I'm going to make sure he gets that half sandwich. And then I'm going to try and include him back into the unit. Now, the children in the unit that the scout is going to be should be aware that this particular scout has special needs. You don't have to give her diagnosis. You don't have to give what they specifically need. But what you don't want them to think is that you're favoring this person and you're letting them get away with stuff. You need to let the children know to the level of their understanding. Then guess what? This individual, it's kind of like when you get a headache. Nobody can see the headache, but it really is bothering you. And when we give you your Tylenol, your aspirin, or your drink of water, your headache goes away. Well, we have to do things a little bit different for him, but he can come back and join you. But it's going to be a little different than they're used to. So we want them to understand that all we're doing is we're leveling the playing ground for these scouts. Okay? Now, one of the things I want you to understand, when a scout is having a meltdown, when someone on the spectrum is having a meltdown, please understand these are not bad children. They are not doing things just to get their way. They're coping the best they can. And it's our job to help them. Okay? Because that stimuli is very, very painful, just like that headache I told you that the other person had. The stimuli is painful, and we need to help them. So we want them to give us examples of behaviors, have them listed down before, during, and after. And then to tell us the recovery. What do we do to help them in the before? What do we help? How do we help them during? And how do we help them after? For example, when Stephen was in the beginning phase, I could literally put my hand on Stephen and it would not send him into fight or flight recovery. However, the minute he hit a meltdown, it didn't make a difference who it was. If you so much as touched him, he was in fight mode. And it wasn't that he wanted to hurt anybody. He was trying to cope, and that was what was happening. Okay? So we want to find out for sure how that is affecting this child and what we can do to help them. They will give you the information. The next set of slides talks about the repairs, and I've kind of been going over a little bit of it, but again, the whole goal is everybody should have a good time. If you had a scout that had a tummy ache, you would take him back to his tent, you would give him a chance to rest, maybe you would give him some Alka-Seltzer, whatever the parents sent, and then as soon as he felt better, you'd bring him back. It's no different with these children, okay? So examples of repairs that I gave you. I gave you an example of a Cub Scout with crayons. Remember I told you some of it is tactile. Maybe the waxy sensation of crayons is a trigger. And the kid's going to start to back up like, oh my God. Well, you still want him to join the coloring event. Give him colored pencils. Give him markers. Give him something else that he can handle. Okay? With the Boy Scout going camping, maybe, so we all know that we have to share our tents. And this boy is just throwing a fit. He cannot sleep with someone in the tent. Your job as the leader is to see, well, what is it? Is it a claustrophobia issue? Is it just a particular scout issue? Okay? And try and work with it. So in my example, I'm talking about that maybe it's just this boy intimidates him. Okay? Or this girl intimidates her. Put them with a different member. Maybe it's claustrophobia. So put their tent closer to the flap, keep the flap open at night, okay, and have their head by the flap. So you got to work with them, but again, be prepared. Anticipate this. Talk about this beforehand. Try it out before you're out at the campsite and see what you can do. A crew or explorer unit might be going out to do some camping, okay, some high adventure. And you get to the breakfast and you have waffles, eggs, scrambled eggs, and you have orange juice. And none of this is working for the scout. See, because The waffles you bought were square. Well, there's a sensation, that edge. They don't like the sound, the feel of that in their mouth. Scrambled eggs, Mom only makes boiled eggs. So he doesn't recognize this yellow mass as eggs, because eggs are white with a little yellow in the middle. Orange juice. Your orange juice you bought has pulp, but guess what? Mom doesn't do that. They don't recognize it, so they can't use it. This is an example of, again, preparedness. Before you guys leave on that unit, on that adventure, make sure you've reviewed the menu and see if everything, the way it's going to be prepared, is what this child's going to be able to handle. If not, if you don't want to change the whole menu, that's fine. Let the parent or guardian know so they can send food for whatever particular meal needs to be changed up, so that, again, this person can enjoy and be sitting right next to their friends and go ahead and have a great camping adventure. So now let's go to the intake form that I promised you. Please look on the screen here and you will see the intake form that I'm talking about. Name, age, guardian or parent's name, and contact information. That should be an email, phone number, cell, and house number. Do they have an IEP or a 504? Which one? Have them circle it. What diagnosis are we dealing with? Is it autism? Is it Asperger's syndrome? Is it ADHD? You could use this for anything. Okay, are there any dietary restrictions? There's quite a few on the autism spectrum that may be gluten-free or have other such dietary restrictions. What activity restrictions will they have? One of the things that my son had is, as a result, and it's very common with autism, is low muscle tone. So this is someone who's going to need a little extra assistance when, say, they are the Boy Scouts and they want to take the swimming merit badge. They're going to need a little extra time, and you may need 1 or 2 extra helpers. Equipment needs. Are they in a wheelchair? Do they use crutches? Do they use a sleep apnea, a CPAP at night? So what equipment is attached to this child or person? Communication issues. Now, I said that not everybody is verbal, but everybody communicates. I had the pleasure of a young man in my unit once that was not verbal. However, he did study Egyptian hieroglyphics. And one time we were on a camping trip and he was trying so desperately to tell us something and we couldn't figure it out. He kept taking a stick and drawing stuff in the sand. His mother came over, read it, and said he had wanted to have some orange juice. Well, what it was, I asked her, I said, what is that? She says, hieroglyphics. He's fascinated with it. Okay? These people are very intelligent. Give them credit for it. Just try and help them. Sensory issues. We talked about the light. We talked about the sound. We talked about the feel. All of that. Sleeping issues. Not everybody on the spectrum sleeps a full night at night. Some of them will go to bed at 6 p.m. and they are up by 3 a.m. You're not going to change that. So you got to make arrangements for someone to be there that's going to be able to be with that child, because clearly that's not going to fit your normal hours. Okay? Medications required. Who's going to give them? How are they going to be stored? And where are they going to be kept? Again, this is things that you need to know. If a child goes to school and is medicated for hyperactivity, and then they're coming to your unit, it would be nice to know whether the child is being medicated or not, because that's going to make a difference in how you're handling things. The other thing about medications, please stress to the parents, if the doctor says they're supposed to be medicated every day, all day, please don't let them give them vacations and send them with you camping. It's not fair to the child, because they're used to that medication keeping them under control so they can enjoy it. You withdraw that medication, you add an extra stimuli, that's a bad recipe. Okay, so we talked about the triggers, we talked about the meltdown behaviors and the recoveries. And now it says actions to be taken pre-trigger, meltdown, post-meltdown. Okay, actions that can be taken during the recovery phase of the actual meltdown. And it may be 2 or 3 things, and it depends on what type of meltdown they have. Some will be physical, some will be verbal, some will be emotional, and the parents should be able to help you with that. And then the last column is any additional comments the parents, the guardians, or the scout want to include. All of this information you can get up front. If you can share it, you guys can work it. And you know what? This is going to be a scout you're going to love and you're going to remember for the rest of your career. Thank you so much for joining my class here. You will see my phone number and my email attached to the slides. And if you have any questions, please do feel free to give me a call. And go scouting. Bye.